still remember that first Christmas at the farmhouse, though sometimes I wonder if it was all a dream, a strange, beautiful, and haunting dream. I had always wanted an old house like this, a place steeped in history, where every creak in the wood seemed to whisper stories of days gone by. The farmhouse was everything I'd hoped for. 2 stories tall, with grand windows, 6 large bedrooms, and enough space for the bed and breakfast I'd dreamed of starting. But before opening it to the world, I wanted it to host one very important event, the Taylor family Christmas reunion. The Taylors had been scattered and weathered by loss in recent years. Too many loved ones were gone, and the family had drifted apart, the distance growing a bit more with each passing holiday. So I sent invitations to every living Taylor I could find and asked them to bring just one thing, a framed photo of a dearly departed relative. My plan was to create a gallery wall in the parlor, a tribute to our ancestors and a way to make them feel present with us, if only in spirit. One by one, my relatives arrived, bearing frames of all shapes and sizes. We placed them on the wall, creating a somber but heartwarming display. There were great-grandparents in black and white, aunts and uncles in faded color photos, even a few distant relatives who had lived and died before I was born. It was comforting to see them there, their faces watching over us as we decorated and laughed, rekindling the closeness we'd lost. Then, on Christmas Eve, a photograph appeared that no one had brought. I spotted it as I was tacking up the last bits of garland around the room. It was a sepia-toned portrait of a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, with dark, intense eyes and a serious expression. She wore an old-fashioned dress with a high collar, her hair pinned up in loose waves. I assumed it must have been placed by one of the relatives, but when I asked around, no one claimed it. Must have been mixed in by mistake, I reasoned, trying to ignore the strange unease that prickled up my spine. But when I caught sight of the woman's intense gaze again, I couldn't shake the feeling that this photograph hadn't come from any of us. It had simply appeared. That night, after all the adults had gone to bed, my niece Autumn and her cousin Ethan, both teenagers with a rebellious streak, decided to go exploring. The next morning, they shyly admitted to having climbed into the attic, determined to find out if the house really was haunted. There, amid dust and shadows, they had found a dusty old keepsake box wedged between the attic floorboards. Inside, they discovered a small leather-bound diary with faded initials, MT. They brought it downstairs, excitement and nerves in their eyes, and handed it to me. The diary had belonged to Margaret Taylor, the woman from the mysterious photograph. Flipping through the pages, I found a note from Margaret, addressed to future family members, her script thin and elegant, but trembling. To my family yet unknown, if you are reading this, then you have returned home, just as I once dreamed. This house was my heart, my sanctuary, my prison. It was meant to be filled with life and laughter. Please bring that back to its walls. For years I waited by the window, hoping for the return of family, watching each Christmas for loved ones who never came. Be the light in these halls once more. Her words filled me with a strange sadness and a sense of belonging. I kept the note to myself, deciding to let it be a quiet secret until Christmas morning. That night, as we gathered for Christmas Eve festivities, I glanced at the gallery wall, half expecting Margaret's picture to move just as "I'll be home for Christmas" played softly in the background. Something extraordinary happened. The faces in each photograph on the gallery wall began to shimmer, their eyes bright and full of life. Before our astonished eyes, each portrait transformed, and then, just like that, they were there with us, standing, breathing, dressed in their Sunday best. Every one of our departed tailors had joined us, stepping gracefully out of their frames and into our world, carrying with them the fashion and formality of their times. I saw my great-grandfather with his thick wool coat and pocket watch, aunts and uncles from generations past in elegant frocks and lace collars, and Margaret herself standing tall in a high-collared dress, her hair pinned in loose waves, more beautiful and vivid than any memory I had ever known. As evening wore on, I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see my grandmother, long past, smiling at me, her eyes crinkled with love. Her fingers felt solid and warm, as though she had only just left us. The farmhouse seemed to transform with the family's presence, the dining room filling with old-fashioned delicacies, roasted goose, steaming pies, and candied fruits that seemed to appear from nowhere. The air was rich with the smell of pine and winter spice, and the music shifted to an old-time tune, carrying us back to eras only our ancestors had known. One by one, these long-lost relatives reached out to us, their touch gentle and reassuring. Each turn, each movement wove a tapestry of memories, allowing us glimpses into their lives. My great-great-grandfather tilling these fields, my great-grandmother quilting by firelight, my grandparents standing on the front porch, their faces stoic yet brimming with fear as they watched their sons disappear down the dirt road on their way to war. My great-aunt giving birth to her first baby with the help of my great-grandmother and a midwife in the bedroom down the hall. I realized that this reunion was a long-standing wish fulfilled, bringing life back into the house as Margaret had so desperately hoped. As the clock struck midnight, our departed tailors gave their final hugs, gazing at us with deep affection before returning to their portraits. Margaret lingered a moment longer, her intense gaze softening as she looked around the room, taking in the love and laughter that now filled her beloved farmhouse. On Christmas morning, as I headed toward the parlor, something caught my eye under the tree, a package wrapped in faded red ribbon. Inside, I found the original deed to the house, bearing the name of my third great-grandfather, and a note in a familiar hand that sent a shiver through me. Margaret's spirit had guided us home, calling us back to where we belonged. With a heart full of gratitude and wonder, I realized that this house had never been a simple, random find. It had been our legacy all along, patiently waiting for the tailors to come home.